Proposition 3 will be listed on the ballot here in the Rockwood School District on November 7th. As you see, it is a 0 tax rate increase. I can promise you that will not be the last time you hear me say that tonight, because that is the fiscal frame when it comes to this particular proposition. I want to start with what is happening in our school district. We have 34 schools that are supporting a variety of programs to meet a wide array of needs of students across our district, and this is one of the highest performing school districts in our nation. Chesterfield Elementary, almost 3 weeks ago, was one of 353 buildings that has actually been named a National Blue Ribbon School for 2023. Our class of 2023 had 279 students that scored a 30 or higher on the ACT. All 4 of our high schools received top rankings via the U.S. News and World Report's Best High Schools list for the 23-24 school year. And you can see where we also rank as relates to niche.com as well, all within the top 12 of the state. You can see that 68% of students in the class of 2023 earned at least 1 college credit during their high school career. For parents and for students, when you hit a college campus, if you find that to be true, actually before you hit the campus, that earning of credits actually is a return on investment that students and families almost immediately experience and is appreciated. We are one of 2 school districts in the state that have been named Best in-State Employers for 2023, and that's according to Forbes. You can see the number of overall organizations that were listed. We are one of 2 school districts in the state of Missouri in which that is the case. So the students that you see on the left side of this particular slide represent 34 students from all 4 high schools in the Rockwood School District that have been named semifinalists for the National Merit Scholarship Program. Marquette High School has 23, which is the largest number of any public or private high school in the state of Missouri. 23 students are National Merit Scholarship finalists or semifinalists. And then overall, when you think of the 292 National Merit semifinalist students in the state of Missouri, 12% come from one school district, that is the Rockwood School District. So this is our theme for the 23-24 school year in the Rockwood School District. Focus on our future. We have 4 goal areas: nurturing learning, ensuring safety, fostering unity, and then advancing facilities. Nurturing learning, the classroom is the reason we have a school district, and we're keeping a focus and definitely efforts surrounded around that very, very important work. Ensuring safety, actually those that are in physical attendance, actually notice we have a number of our school safety officers that are here. We now have 4 armed school safety officers that work in conjunction with our school resource officers to add additional layers of safety here in the Rockwood School District. In their case, specifically and most attentively, attention addressed at our elementary grade spans. Fostering unity, we are here for all students, working to make sure that we're providing a notion in a space of dignity and belonging for all of the learners in the Rockwood School District. And we will talk in some specificity when it comes to advancing facilities. You're going to hear a lot of numbers, and I'm sure via mailers, via websites, social media, other articles that have appeared in newspapers. There are a number of financial facts that are floating around. But I want us to go back to this notion of financial and fiscal responsibility. The fact is, it's not a new mindset or methodology that we have in Rockwood. This is a continuation of work and decisions that have been made in the past. Over the past 12 years, we have been able to save more than $13 million as a result of us taking advantage of different financing opportunities and call dates when it comes to different bond items. We are a district, one of the few in the state that actually, according to Standards & Poor's, has a AAA rating, which is the highest level possible in the state of Missouri. That has been true for the Rockwood School District since the year 2007. We have earned the Meritorious Budget Award for 23 consecutive years in the Rockwood School District. You can see the Certificate of Excellence, that's been 18 straight years for the Rockwood School District. And last but certainly not least, for at least the last 15 years, we've received a top level opinion during annual independent audits. That means a clean audit for at least the past 15 years. When you add or total the comments that are listed on the bottom 4 bullets of this particular slide, we stand alone. We are the only district in the state of Missouri that is able to make that particular claim. We're recording, so I'm going to clean this up, and I'll just say this. We do a lot of comparing and engage in a lot of observation of what is happening across school districts, especially in St. Louis County. So this slide gives you an idea of expenditure per ADA, how much we spend on average to educate a student in the Rockwood School District. And I will provide a little bit of wait time. You see a listing of the school districts on the right side of this slide, and you can see where we happen to rank in comparison to other school districts in this county. You can see our each.com ranking, but you see our comparison of expenditure per ADA, just giving an idea in terms of what we are able to provide our students and what that looks like in terms of demonstration of financial appropriateness in terms of expenditures for our students and for our stakeholders ultimately. And I believe that Mr. Steinberg is going to pick up at this point. He'll provide some context to a couple of slides, and I'll be back in just a moment.
Good evening. My name is Dan Steinberg. I've been Director of Finance for Rockwood. So I'm going to give a couple of minutes, just some background information on the funding options that school districts have for capital items that are part of Prop 3. But first, I'm going to continue just with the history of fiscal responsibility. So our last bond issue that we had was back in 2017. It was a $95 million bond issue that was authorized by the community, of which $75 million went into special projects. So we built a new elementary school down in Eureka. We also had some additions to our high schools and STEM labs and some other various special projects. So of that, $20 million of it went to cycle maintenance items and technology items that are included property. So, but with that work and through work of Chris Friend and our facilities department, we were able to save $5.7 million through that bond issue. Through the competitive bid process and being conscious of our costs that were going through the project. So with that $5.7 million, we were able to actually take advantage and put some additional projects into our buildings, including our main and B gym bleachers at all the high schools. All the high schools also received tennis court renovations. We also had some ADA compliant replacement at a few schools. Part of that time, we were also transitioning to district-owned transportation, so we were able to do some work in our transportation lots down in Eureka, as well as Rockwood Summit received some renovations in the buildings for wellness as well. So $5.7 million was saved through the process, and we were able to put that back into the buildings. So when it comes to those capital items, and when we refer to that, we're talking about construction of a building, or as Prop 3 is related to, it is just maintaining our buildings through HVAC replacements, technology needs, safety item needs. School districts in Missouri have two options. One is issuing general obligation bonds, so that's a long-term debt. So what happens is the district will go out to the voters for approval. Upon approval, we'll issue bonds. We'll receive the proceeds so that we can spend and put and take care of the projects that are placed for there. And then what we'll do is we'll pay that off over the course of normally 20 years. So we pay back bondholders the principal amounts that they provided us, and as well on top of that is interest costs. So especially in the current interest rate environment it is now, it may not be as favorable for doing that, but that is a process that school districts have, an option for there. The second option is a dedicated operational tax levy in the capital fund. So putting funds through their tax levy into our capital fund in order to provide a dedicated operational tax levy that will take care of those annual cycle maintenance needs, technology needs, safety item needs. So having a dedicated annual source of revenue in order to put back into our buildings. That being said, all of that through a capital fund will be able to be taken care of without incurring additional interest costs. So the main difference between the two, with the bond issue, you're paying back interest over the course of more than 20 years. And with the dedicated levy, there are no additional interest costs associated with that. So historically, Rockwood has in the past relied on bond issues. So we've gone through the process where we've gone to voters for approval, and then we have maintained our technology, facilities, and safety by issuing bonds, paying those back, paying interest on top of that. So as a result, those items are being financed. In the last, just as an example, the last 5 years, the district has paid over $40 million in interest alone on our outstanding debt. So we've incurred debt in the past, and we've been paying that off. In the last 5 years alone, $40 million of that has been repaid to bondholders in the form of interest. So this slide here, and for those here, maybe a little small on the screen, but this just provides kind of an option, a summary of the options that we have as school districts. So again, for those that has the capital levy and the bond issue, now it comes time just to take a look at what are the capital needs in place and what is the best option that we have for those. So typically when you have new buildings, classroom additions, facility upgrades, having bond issue is an option to have because it provides your immediate need. So you receive the funds, pay the projects, and then pay back over the course of 20 years. Bondholders will accept a payment plan over 20 years, but typically construction companies will not for those items. So that's typically why you have that cash infusion come in to take care of those. Along with the bond issue, you do incur additional interest costs, as I kind of mentioned. Each bond issue does require a voter approval, and then you'll have a dedicated debt service levy. So in regards to a capital levy, it allows for flexibility in order to address your ongoing needs. Facility type items such as HVAC, roofing, parking lots, safety and technology, having a dedicated source of revenue allows you to match the life cycle of those items. Think about a Chromebook. How many times a Chromebook could be reused or replaced over the course of 20 years? When you're paying that through bond issue, you're paying that over the course of 20 years when those items might be replaced 2 or 3 times. It also matches, as I kind of mentioned, the life cycle of those items. Just having a refresh, having a plan in place in order to address those items. Planning and prioritization allows us to address those needs. It allows us to kind of take care of the safety and technology upgrades. Chris Friend here is we have a video with him, and he's going to kind of explain and go through what happens at where we currently are, and then when you rely on bond issues to take care of these items, what could happen to our facilities.
The Rockwood School District currently has 23 of 37 locations with HVAC systems that exceed 20 years in age. Please keep in mind the life expectancy of these systems is 15 to 20 years. So how did we get in this position? The Rockwood School District has a long history of depending on bond issue funds to perform cycle maintenance replacements such as HVAC. This isn't uncommon in other school districts, but there are 2 consequences to doing so. 1, you pay interest on the improvements that you're making for general maintenance. And 2, if you're not successful or don't pass a bond issue for an extended period of time, you can end up in a situation like this. From 2010 to 2015, the Rockwood School District was unsuccessful in passing a bond issue. The district passed a large bond issue in 2017, but the majority of that bond issue was dedicated to building improvements such as the New Eureka Elementary School and STEM lab improvements at the 4 high schools, which also included additions at Eureka High School and Marquette. This left little capacity for cycle maintenance HVAC replacements, and that's part of the reason we're in the position we are today. So if you take those 2 large gaps, that's 11 years of deferred maintenance as far as our HVAC systems go. That's why it's imperative to separate the funding source from bond issue and cycle maintenance so you can establish a dedicated fund annually to make these cycle replacements.
So what you now see listed on the slide is actually on the right side of the slide here, what you see is a informational flyer from Proposition 4, which was back in 2015. On the left side is what you happen to see, which is actually embedded here within this red oval. It's a quote from our Chief Financial Officer at the time, Tim Rooney. And he simply is stating that prop back in 2015 is a part of a long-range plan that will allow the school district to transition into a pay-as-you-go method of funding annual cycle maintenance projects. This has been an ongoing mindset, frame, and ultimately plan that this district's been thinking about and working toward over some years. So you can see a bit of a timeline here that goes all the way back to 2014, and you can just see the natural transitions that have occurred over time to get us to this point in time, to be able to have a conversation and a discussion about a 0 tax rate increase. This, what you see in the red is what we are working to avoid. You can see the total of the funds. Again, this is Prop 4, so this is back in 2015. Principal and interest cost the district at that point in time, just over $97 million. The second line that you see here actually speaks to the projects themselves, the amount of proceeds, those proceeds from Prop 4 that were able to actually be dedicated toward the projects themselves. So the $76 million were able to actually be dedicated toward project completion itself. The challenge and what we're really working to avoid, especially given what Dan just described in terms of what is appropriate for capital and then for bond dollars, is trying to avoid the spread over $20 million of interest that were actually needed to keep up with the principal and the interest payments for Prop 4. And again, that was the interest environment back in 2015. I would argue it looks different than it did 6 months ago, and it's most definitely different than it was 12 to 18 months ago right now as we speak. The best way to describe what we are looking to do is this. We are asking our community for approval to take money out of debt service and to place it into capital projects. Imagine a 14-inch pie. The pie, the diameter does not change. It remains a 14-inch pie. We are simply slicing it a little differently, taking monies out of debt service and placing them into capital projects. Again, taking monies out of debt service and rolling them over to the capital projects fund. Over this 2-year transition, you can see the total amount of money as a result of Proposition 3 that would actually transition again from debt service to capital projects. And this would allow us to address some of the needs that we have described. I'll go into it and add more depth and more context in just a moment here. That's what we are ultimately looking to do as a result of this particular reallocation, which is what Prop 3 is. Again, addressing our safety, technology, and facility needs in the Rockwood School District. Safety is a perfect example. The Rockwood School District is 150.6 square miles. Not a small place. And radio communications, for example, is a need in this district. In this building, in Lafayette High School, there are most definitely nooks and crannies and spaces in this building where I don't care how new that cell phone is, I don't care how strong that signal strength happens to be, something happens and it just doesn't work. That's not theory, that is reality. As I look at our school safety officers at the back of the room, we need to be able to clearly and cleanly and timely communicate with staff across the entirety of the Rockwood School District for a variety of reasons. It could be logistical, could be other reasons as to why we need to effectively be able to communicate with staff. We need something that looks different as relates to radio communication in our district. Increasing surveillance camera coverage and updating older cameras. You'd be surprised how much time administrators and other staff actually spend looking, reviewing, rewinding, playing, fast forward, playing, looking at video coverage to try to figure out what in fact has actually gone on. And that's not just for activities that occur Monday through Friday throughout the week. You'd be surprised at what is needed in terms of review over the course of weekends as well. Interesting viewership sometimes there. And then updating intruder alarm systems. We will always be looking to the threat horizon and trying to find the most effective and appropriate means to meet the needs that are in front of us. That would be an ongoing challenge that we would be looking to address. So technology upgrades. I don't even like to look at this slide because this is having a direct impact on students right now. If you have a new 6th grader in the Rockwood School District, i.e. a student that was in 5th grade last year and is now in 6th grade, or if you have a student that was an 8th grader and is now a 9th grader in our district, here's what happened this summer. They went home at the end of the school year. Everyone was celebrating that fact. But what looked and felt different was, as they went home, if you looked in that backpack, you noticed that there was a laptop and there was also a charger that was with them. Typically what would happen is that would stay behind. That wouldn't follow them home, and they actually used it to start the school year. What would typically happen is that particular piece of technology would stay behind. It would be reallocated and reused in the elementary school or the middle school. Because of where we're standing as it relates to financing right now, our students right now are feeling that impact. They're feeling that impact. And this concern will only grow. Our students need to be able to master whatever is happening and needs to happen on that particular piece of technology, not only to be successful K-12 in our district, but whether it's heading to the world of work, to proudly serve our nation in the military, to head to a 2-year or 4-year institution, they have to be able to thrive in this environment, and we are already seeing impact. We also have other technological needs in terms of cycle items as well. Infrastructure, wiring, phones, cybersecurity measures, all of this has to come together and work effectively for us to do what we ultimately need to do with students. Passing Prop 3 would provide annual dedicated funds for technology, enabling a scheduled annual upgrade, again, without us having to borrow funds. There's also a cost that, quite honestly, this type of expenditure makes much more sense to come out of capital dollars. Dan showed a slide earlier this evening that gave you an idea of what are more appropriate uses of different types of funds. For example, as I'm looking at 2 Chromebooks, on average, they each cost $405. If we use bond monies to purchase the Chromebook, by the time you factor in interest, over the life of, actually beyond the life of the Chromebook itself, over the 20 years, when you're paying it back, all of a sudden, for a $405 piece of technology, you are actually expending $715. And please note, Dan mentioned this as well, the replacement cycle, the refresh cycle, says that this device should be refreshed 3 times before the debt is actually paid off. So the shelf life is 5 to 6 years for a Chromebook, yet you're still on the hook for almost approaching, I should say not almost, approaching double the cost for another 14 years after you're no longer using the device. It's not a fiscally appropriate, responsible manner to use and to expend monies. And again, the passage of this particular proposition would allow us to have an annual and scheduled upgrade so that we're able to get ahead of this particular concern when it comes to technology. That concern will impact staff. I would argue it is impacting staff right now. That impact will only grow. This is not a small district. 150.6 square miles, 3.8 million square feet of space. That equates to us having to maintain 3 Busch stadiums. And these are reoccurring costs, or costs that occur on an annual basis. That alone is $30 million. A lot of space, a lot of equipment, a lot of needs here in Rockford School District. Age of our schools. We're in Lafayette High School, built in 1989. Take a look. We don't have a single building that's been built from 2020 moving forward. We have some buildings that are most definitely legacy buildings. We have 2 buildings that actually predate World War II. We have a number of buildings that were actually built during or after the Korean conflict. We have some older buildings in our district. There's no question about that. It's almost like rings of a tree. You can just see what was happening as it related to growth and how a community ultimately needed to respond to deal with that growth. Now we're dealing with maintenance of buildings of all types of age here in the Rockford School District. On average, the average school in this district is 47 years old. I would say that's very young for a person. That's a young person, but for a school building, that's slightly different. These are not pieces of clip art. These are not imagined. These aren't picked up from elsewhere in our nation. These are 2 pictures within our school district. I don't even want to speak to what's going on the floor here, but it speaks to thousands of students, thousands of adults, thousands of stakeholders in and out of our schools. And it's just a function of wear and tear. So it was brisk this morning, gorgeous this afternoon, but it was brisk this morning. Don't lose sight of August 21st. I will never forget. It's 4:55 in the morning. I'm on the other side of this particular parking lot because we have a news story to start the school year. We didn't go inside. We stayed outside for this news shot. It's 4:55 in the morning. I'm pulling up. I remember stepping out of my vehicle, putting my suit jacket on, and within about 3 nanoseconds, at 4:55 that morning, I knew it was going to be a very, very, very long and very, very hot week as it began to stick literally to my body at 4:55 in the morning, close to 2 hours before the sun is even going to rise. We had a long, very hot, and humid start to our school year. As a result, we had air conditioning challenges across the entirety. Every quadrant, every building in this district struggled to keep up with our challenges. What you see on this slide is a snapshot of our challenge. You see all of our buildings, and you can see the age of the HVAC systems. So that red line speaks to 20 years. That's how old, or that's the timestamp for the red line. What you happen to see is 23 buildings that have HVAC systems that are 20 years or older in the Rockwood School District. The average age for an HVAC system in our schools is 17.5 years. We've discussed this with our Board of Education as we were working our way through all the challenges to get the school year up and going from a comfort and safety perspective. And this number is very important. With today's dollars, it would cost us $46.5 million to replace and to update the HVAC systems of those buildings that are 20 years or older. But here's our challenge. I will flat out tell this community, as I've shared with our Board of Education, we can't do this all at once. We have to find a strategic stagger to replacing these systems. If we replace all 23 of these systems at once, in 20 years, leaders will be facing, and the community will be facing the exact same challenge trying to figure out how to replace 23 systems at once. We have to figure out a stagger that's going to make sense. There has to be some strategies, some analysis of the systems themselves to ultimately get these replaced. I have a strong suspicion that August of 2023 will not be the only time in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years that we experience a very warm or very hot start to our school years. Our buildings are not designed to open windows. To be very frank, our staff, students, and stakeholders are not designed to deal with heat indices well over 100 degrees. We have to have functioning systems in order to do what we need to do for our students, our staff, and ultimately our community. This is a tiger that will catch us. Something is going to have to give when it comes to HVAC needs. I know it's in the 50s and 60s. Our community needs to remember what August felt like, because August will come back. Dan has spoken a little bit about our funding, specifically where our buckets happen to be as relates to school finances here in the state of Missouri. So our Fund 1 is our incidental funds where support staff, salaries, benefits, supplies, and utilities ultimately in fact come from. Number 2 is our teacher fund, teacher salaries and benefits. What we're talking about is Funds 3 and 4, specifically moving monies out of debt service, which focuses on debt payments, and placing those funds into our capital projects bucket. That's maintenance, upgrades, security, and then technology. We are required to bring this before our community for board approval per Missouri law. This is our tax rate history in the Rockwood School District. And if you actually go back, almost 3 weeks ago, our Board of Education lowered our tax rate. It has not been this low in the Rockwood School District since September of 1991. It's been a very long time since we've seen the tax rate even close to what we are experiencing right now in our school district. I've talked about comparisons in the past. I want to do it one more time. So if we talk about tax rates, again, all of the school districts in St. Louis County, you see where we rank as a school district compared to other school districts in St. Louis County in terms of tax rate. Kind of apples to apples comparison as it relates to taxation, specifically rate. You can see where the Rockwood School District in fact ranks. So, reallocation. Reallocating the tax revenue is what we're again discussing when it comes to Proposition 3. I'm going to go back. This is a zero change to the district's overall tax rate. And what we're looking again to do is to move monies from debt service into our capital projects. Again, moving monies from debt service, Fund 4, into Fund 3 capital projects. Please note before and after the transition that the tax rate remains the same. No change. So for Lafayette High School, you can see 3 buckets or columns of prioritization for projects themselves. One piece that I do want to call out is this surveillance station for our school resource officer here in this particular building. And the thought would be there would be, in this individual's office, a bank of widescreen TVs. So that this individual is able to pull up and be able to live stream and view the entirety of the campus in one space, to be able to make decisions, to communicate, ultimately respond if needed. You can see what the priority items, and these aren't the only items, but these are priority items that need attention here at Lafayette High School. HVAC system, elevator, you can read the remaining items that are listed on this particular slide. So, we've been asked this question. As a result of this transition, as a result of Proposition 3, would this passage in any way, shape, or form threaten our ability to be able to effectively pay down our debt? It will not. We will still be able to meet our obligations if Proposition 3 were to, in fact, pass. With our current maturity schedule, the remaining funding that is in our debt service fund would allow us to do what we need to do, fiscally appropriate and responsible. This has been another question that's been raised, and I think that this one I'm going to spend a little bit of time on, just to provide a little context. So, won't the tax rate go down once the debt has, in fact, been paid off? In theory, the answer is yes. There's an important caveat. Our existing debt schedule is scheduled to be paid off in the 2038-2039 school year. The overall tax levy would only be reduced if the district did not incur any additional debt or issue any new bonds over the next 15 years. It's a pretty aggressive assumption. I can tell you, as I think of the athletic field on this campus alone, something is going to have to happen within the next 15 years. Something is actually, in fact, going to have to happen in the next 15 years. So let's talk about this blue bonds. Imagine we're talking about a home in the Rockwood School District that is 47 years old. Imagine you were actually able to engage in an inspection process. So you know it has good bones, it has stood, it can continue to stand, but it needs some work. HVAC's a little wonky in a couple of rooms, a couple of needs for electrical upgrades in the building or in the home. And let's say there are 4 shingles in the very front of this roof that need attention. This is your home. It's 47 years old. You're going to move into this house, and for the next 15 years, you are going to do nothing. Let's talk about the 4 shingles. Much like reading, math, speech intervention, the earlier the better. I would argue the mindset actually translates well with this analogy. If there are 4 shingles that are missing, it makes a lot of sense to intervene as quickly as you possibly can and replace 4 shingles. If you don't, and you wait 15 years, not only are you going to be replacing more than 4 shingles, you're going to be replacing who knows what is going to be happening on the inside of the building as a result of the exposure over the course of 15 years. Because in 15 years, that is now a 62-year-old home that does need some work. Not some attention, it needs some work at that particular point in time. Prop 3 will allow us to address the shingle challenge with this analogy. It will allow us and give us the funding that we need to effectively intervene, especially in spaces where we know we need attention as quickly as we possibly can to address the needs, ongoing, annual basis needs that we have in our schools. Not only maintenance, but security and then technology needs here in the Rockwood School District. So we need to effectively and efficiently maintain our facilities in order to continue providing outstanding education for all the students in this district. At the front of this library, there were a number of flyers, handouts that were available. On the back of each of them, you will see a copy of the ballot language itself. I have said this more than once, and I will say it again. It is more voluminous than one would hope, but according to statutory form and expectations, the language that appears and is printed and will be printed in the manner in which it has to be. there's a lot that's going on. So when I was in high school, we diagrammed sentences, and that's what this is an attempt to do, to provide some context and understanding so that when people walk into that ballot box, they have a clear idea of what to expect, how the language will flow, what is actually going to be embedded within the proposition language itself. The key takeaways is to stick and stay through the close of this ballot language itself. But please note, the net impact is a no tax rate increase, and as relates to the change in total levy, this is a zero-sum conversation. There will be no change in the total taxation levy in the Rockwood School District. Again, a no tax rate increase is what Proposition 3 has been discussed, has been shared, and ultimately how it will appear ultimately be implemented if it were to pass here at the Rockwood School District. So, what happens if it does not, in fact, pass? I think this is a conversation that we have to have as well. The flat-out truth, honest truth is this: the needs aren't going away. I argue the needs will only grow over time. If that means we have to come back, despite everything that we've said when it comes to this, to try to avoid this hit of this significance, likely at least 20% of our funds going toward interest payments themselves, it makes much more sense to do something that looks different, but our needs are going to force our hand and force us to come back and have to do something that looks different. What we're trying to, which is potentially a bond issue, which will actually have to include interest payments. What we are working to move away from is a fix on failure frame. That's what we're operating from right now, at this particular point in time. If it breaks, we examine our budget, figure out if we can, in fact, some way, find a way to afford whatever the change happens to be, the fix happens to be, and if we are able to do so, we make the fix, we make the change that we ultimately have to. That is not a place of strategic high ground, and it's fiscally putting us in a bad position. It definitely does not allow us to engage in a scheduled maintenance, a scheduled process and plan to address the needs that we're having as a school. Talked about this example again. We're really working, especially given the needs that we're expressing, needs that we are clearly seeing and observing, and needs that we're trying to address, really working to avoid these interest payments moving forward. So, November 7th, every vote will count. Prop 3 will require a simple majority +1 in order to pass. Truly believe it's important that people have their voice, in fact, be heard. We truly believe this is a fiscally responsible plan. We've analyzed this, we've talked about this, we've looked at this for some time. We truly believe this is a fiscally responsible plan to help address the needs that we're having as a school district. Great things are happening in Rockwood, and we're just working to keep this highly rated school district moving forward. And let's work to ensure that every student has the updated safety technology and facilities that they need to learn and ultimately to reach their full potential.